everybody. Welcome. Welcome. We're streaming live on Facebook. Good to have you at User's Guide for the Soul. We're exploring one of the most powerful Kabbalistic texts that have come down called the Tanya. And we're in the middle of chapter 39, learning about how to elevate everything you do, all the Jewish stuff you do, your Torah mitzvahs, to even the very highest world at sometimes, the highest conscious world of Bria. And we'll even talk about the super conscious world of Atzilus today. So, yes, Rick.
I think we went over this once before, and you may go over it again today. Earlier in this discussion, it said that the mitzvahs are elevated tremendously on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. Mm-hmm. Tell me why the other holidays are not included, such as obviously Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or Purim, for example, which is one of the major holidays. So tell me.
Let's leave Purim out of it. Purim's a special category, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen it written, but I think that the other festivals and certainly the high holidays absolutely apply the same way. So sorry if I misled anyone. He mentioned Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh because that's kind of the usual heartbeat of the Jewish week and the Jewish month that we work with. But Pesach that's coming up, same dynamic applies. Rosh Hashanah, same dynamic applies. So you can use Rosh Hashanah to elevate, in fact, the whole year, because now the energy from the whole year is coming down. So you should think of them in the same way for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the main points we talked about, is how we now elevate a mitzvah using our devotion, using our sense of Kavanah. So we know that when I do a physical mitzvah, I'm actually right now standing in the middle of the reason why the world was created, as the Alter Rebbe says, to make a home for God here in the lowest realms. And only a physical mitzvah, or Torah study as well, to some extent, can do that, because a physical mitzvah is completely surrendered to God. There's no soul that has to love or fear God or work with us. There's no separation at all. It's purely surrendered to God, and it's completely transparent. You look at a mitzvah and you see, so to speak, God's face, the inner essence of God's will. But it's still just a physical mitzvah here in the physical world. So to get it to rise up and create more and more light, now it's our work of giving that physical mitzvah, the body, a soul, infusing it with our own emotions of love and awe, and that gives the mitzvah wings so it can soar up to various worlds. And we learned about the technique behind this, and this is the last several classes, so review if you want a more in-depth explanation. If my emotion, my love, and my respect that I'm infusing in this mitzvah are just the natural love and respect because I'm a Jewish person, I love doing Jewish stuff, and you scratch the surface and boom, I love eating that tasty matzah on Pesach, as we all do, right? Then my mitzvah will soar up with the natural love and awe of my heart, and it will soar up to the world of Yetzirah, which you can see on the PDF I sent, the second spiritual world, and we'll even unite with the 10 Sfirot in the world of Sphira. So the mitzvah itself unites completely with the light in those 10 Sfirot and unites with God. That's the point of our meditation. It's the point of our Kavanah, to elevate the mitzvah, as we'll see. If I want to go one world higher, how do I do that? The intellect is a higher phenomenon than the emotion. And so if my emotions are not natural, but my emotions are intellectually generated through meditation, through the techniques we've learned, now that emotion is like a yo-yo that's come down from, it's being held by the hand of intellect, so to speak. It comes down and it grabs the mitzvah and it brings it back up to its own level. And even though it's an emotion with an intellectual root. So it belongs in the world of intellect, which is the world of Bria. So if I've meditated and created my own emotions that will generate wings for that mitzvah, now it soars up to the world of Bria, the third highest world, and can unite with the Sfirot there. But what if I'm just a normal person who loves doing Jewish things, and I don't really have a taste for meditation and for deep contemplation? What do? Is Bria off limits to me? No, because as Rick said, on Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh, which is also coming up, we have a phenomenon where the worlds are elevated because of the holiness of that time. And there's a pillar that forms from the world of Yetzirah to the world of Bria. And that pillar or that beam, we can use it because it elevates us and it elevates our consciousness. We can use it to elevate mitzvahs that would have been normally brought up to the world of Yetzirah all the way to the world of Bria and create tremendous light there. And I really suggest you try this. This is not something meant to be learned as a curiosity or as an intellectual delight. This is still a how-to book. So definitely, I hope last Shabbat, as I was suggested, this Shabbat, we take some time during whatever services you're at, whatever prayers you do, to stop and meditate, collect in your mind and your heart all the mitzvahs and all the Torah you did during that week. Visualize that beam that leads to the higher world. Use your intellectually generated emotions and elevate them. It's something every Jew can do. And not to confuse your imagination with the world of Bria. If I imagine the world of Bria, that's my imagination. But that is a portal to something abstract behind my imagination that is real. And although it's very, very subtle, we're the ones that are responsible for using these dynamics. And if you try it, you'll see you come away with a deep sense of satisfaction. And after you lived 120 years, perhaps you'll look back and see the amazing accomplishments you did. Yes, Noreen?
Do you think on Pesach, during the Seder, that is also a time like Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh?
100%, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So all the if you were frustrated, in my house, if I if I survive Pesach, I know I'm probably good for the next year with my wife. She's not going to leave me. So Pesach is like, it's pretty stressful. We got our cleaning day set. We got figured out this year, by the way, Pesach comes right out of Shabbat. So you're not really supposed to be burning chametz and cleaning on Shabbat. So it's even more stressful. So if you need a time to take all that and preparing for Shabbat, cleaning a chametz, that's a mitzvah. So definitely at the Seder, take a moment, think about all the preparations you've done, all the learning perhaps you've done, anything you collected to lead the Seder, any insights you gained, and take a moment to recognize now you have the opportunity to elevate all those mitzvahs beyond your natural capacity. And come back to our meditation in class or on your own in the morning. That's your anchor where you find the route to elevate those mitzvahs. And that has to do with the three conscious worlds, Asiya, Yetzirah, and Bria. But there's another world above that, Atzilus, this mysterious world that is pure unity with God. It is dominated by Chokhmah, as we saw, which means just pure awareness of God, where there's no self-identity whatsoever. There's no created beings there. There's not the possibility for any separation from God. So how can there be a created being? And there's a way to actually do avodah, to do this meditation and work on the level of Atzilus, as we're going to see today. It's very rarefied. Only very few individuals really in a generation operate at this level. But again, we have a little what do you call the peephole in the door window? There's a word for it, normal word for that. Call it a peephole. We have a peephole where we get a glimpse of it 3 times a day if we have a full prayer practice, or once a day if we have a once-a-day prayer practice. We have a way to have many Atzilus experiences, which we'll learn about today. So, hi Dan Schiffer, good to have you on Facebook. Any questions, let me know. And let's dive inside page 564 in the Tanya. והנה צמצום זה, היא סיבת ההערה שמאירות שם חוכמה בינה דת של אין סוף ברוך הוא לנשמות אלו בעולם הבריאה.
This contraction, which Kabbalah of Atzilus undergoes in order to radiate in Bria, thus causes the soul in the world of Bria to be illuminated by a glow of Kabbalah in the Ein Sof, Kabbalah of Atzilus. It is this contraction that enables them to have some perception of the Ein Sof's light.
So where we left off, we were talking about how the world of Atzilus, which is dominated by Chokhmah, which means pure awareness that there's only God, there's only one being, there's no created anything. How can that possibly reach the world of Bria where there's created beings? Where if the whole point of the light of Atzilus is that there's only God, then how can these beings in Bria, which are separate created beings apparently, how can they receive any of that light? There has to be a massive contraction so that instead of the light of Chokhmah dominating, now it's the light of Bina, as we learned in Kabbalah, the light of comprehension, that in a very, very contracted and veiled sense can now create a tiny ray that goes and creates the entire world of Bria. And then these beings, which can only work with comprehension, right? My highest faculty to grasp anything is comprehension. Above that, there's no me. I can't grasp it, right? And the world of Atzilus is above comprehension completely. So there's a massive contraction that allows a little leftover light to come in, and that becomes the world of Bria, which is dominated by Bina. מה שאין כן באצילות שאינם בבחינת צמצום כל כך, אי אפשר לשכלים נבראים לקבל מהן.
The created intellectual beings of Bria cannot, however, apprehend Chabad as they are, that is, in all their undimmed intensity, in the world of Atzilut, where the Chabad are not contracted to such a great degree as in Bria.
So if I'm a created being now, in Bria, so to speak, an angel in Bria, a soul in Bria that's rooted in Bria, how am I going to comprehend something that's above comprehension? How am I, as a created being, going to receive light that can only be accepted by a vessel that's united with God and not a created being? It's by definition, I don't get it. So now the Chabad that's in Atzilus, which is really Chabad within Chokhmah. It's, for those of you that have learned the Kabbalah, it's Bina and Dat she b'Chokhmah, as they're included in Chokhmah, and the whole thing is really just Chokhmah that shines with intense light. Now that contracted form can emerge in the world of Bria as Bina, which illuminates Bria. And so it's a world that's about comprehension and intellect. לכן לית מה חשבת דילהון תפיסה שם כלל.
Therefore, their thought cannot grasp there at all. That is, the thought and intellect of the created beings of Bria can in no way grasp the light radiating in Atzula.
And that's a very familiar phenomenon. If you've sat and meditated, or if you've pondered something and looked inside, you recognize there's my physical being, there's my emotional world, there's my intellectual world, there's my first grasp of comprehension. And past that, it's like most people have a sense of just darkness or silence or stillness or whatever it is you want to call it in meditation. But there's no comprehension past that. There seems to be a point of emptiness within us, or past that there's nothing. Of course, past that is everything. Past that is infinity. Past that is the major, the major. It's much bigger spiritually, so to speak, than the physical world. But it looks like nothing to us because it's beyond what we can comprehend. So there's nothing we can comprehend in there because it's infinite in there. So that's our personal experience of this phenomenon, that the beings of Bria cannot comprehend at all this light that's in Atzilus, because that's completely about self-nullification to the point where there's only God. And comprehension can't go there, because you can only comprehend something when you have an abstract point of view to start from. לכן הוא מדור לצדיקים הגדולים. For this reason,
Atzillah is the abode of the great tzaddikim.
שעבודתם היא למעלה, מעלה, אפילו מבחינת חילוכים הנמשכות מן הבינה ודת, בגדולתו יתברך. Paula, if you'll unmute, I want you to do with service.
Whose service of God is far superior even to fear and love derived from understanding and knowing his greatness.
So we have several types of service that we've gone through. You have just doing the physical mitzvah with a basic sense, this is a mitzvah. That's where it starts. Then you have, I'm doing it with a love and awe that is just who I am as a Jew, and I'm uncovering it, I'm using it. That's a second level. Then I have service where I've created love and awe through intellectual meditation. I'm now a meditator, and I have emotions I've generated, and that is another type of service. That's the service in Bria. But there's this additional type of service which is superior to any of that. If you can imagine, it's above, of course, just doing a mitzvah. It's above doing a mitzvah with natural love and awe. It's above doing a mitzvah with tremendously intellectually generated love and awe. This level is all about pure surrender to God. And this is not like, this is a really great person who does really great things. Maybe they're this kind of tzaddik. This is a very rare individual in a generation and even in history to talk about an individual that focuses like this. So no, we're talking about the greats of every generation. And certainly, of course, Moshe is the model for this. And they're described as a chariot, as we said. They are completely surrendered such that it's not about their love and awe anymore. It's not about their understanding or intellect anymore. It's just they're like a chariot where if that's what the infinite wants, that's what they do. And it's not even a question of their own will. A chariot doesn't have a will like a horse where you say go right and it says, okay, you fed me, so I'll go right.
Is this where
Chariot,
the
you turn it right and it's turned right. It has no will of its own.
Is this where the prophets would be also, beside Moshe?
Yes, certainly all the prophets are tzaddikim on this level. Moshe, Avraham, Sarah, Rivka,
Okay.
but also throughout history. Kabbalah sees the Arizal as a tzaddik of this stature, and certainly, I would say the Alter Rebbe that we're learning from was a tzaddik of this stature as well. So it's not like here where I'm explaining something that is above my level by so many degrees. When we're sitting learning with the Alter Rebbe, this is someone who is teaching from the perspective of someone who serves God on his level. So he's trying to put it into words we'll understand, not even just so that we understand it, but so that we can now understand the importance of how we elevate a mitzvah and the importance, as we'll see, of the little glimpse we have of this type of service every day. Make sense? Top of 565. Kamo she'olam hatzilut u'lamala mala mibchinat bina v'dat l'sechel nivra.
Just as Asilu transcends by far the level of the understanding and knowledge of a created being's intellect.
Right, just as Asilus transcends anything of our intellect. Right, the Alter Rebbe at one point said it'd be silly to say I can't understand this profound and deep math concept because my arms are too short. My arms are too short, so I can't reach this concept. It's just too deep a concept for my physical arms. Of course, you'd look at it and you'd say, well, this person doesn't even understand the difference between physical depth and intellectual depth. We use the same word depth, but you can't use your arm to reach something that's physically deep. If I gave you a pair of tongs that were 8 feet long, you still couldn't reach deep enough to get this intellectually deep concept. It's not that kind of depth. It's a different dimension. So same thing here. Atzilus is not just super high intellect such that it's only available to certain geniuses. Atzilus is beyond intellect, and intellect is not a tool we can use to reach beyond even comprehension. So these tzaddikim really have worked on themselves and have the capacity to be completely surrendered. In our language, they're only a divine soul to the point where it's just all they are is the will of their divine soul. And it's beyond intellect at that point. It's just pure awareness of God's oneness. Their service. Rick, I think it's you.
No, I just finished, but that's okay.
Oh.
Their service is rather on the level of an actual chariot of the Blessed Ein Sof.
Right, so higher than love and fear and higher than the intellect is this level of a chariot where I'm living in a physical body, but my awareness as a tzaddik of this level is there's no one here but God, and that's my actual base reality. That's my normal consciousness. I wake up and there's no one here but God in the morning, and off I go. And everything that I do at that level is above my own intellect or my own emotions. Libater elav b'mtziut ulehikalel be'oro yiparechem v'chol asher lahem. And Dan?
Nullifying their very existence before him and incorporating themselves and all that they possess within his light.
Yeah, that broke up a little for me. Let me repeat that. These tzaddikim are nullifying their very existence before God and incorporating themselves and all they possess within God's light. So practically, they're like a mitzvah. The same way a mitzvah is completely surrendered to God and as a chariot, these tzaddikim they basically reach that level psychologically all their lives, where their only appreciation is that this is just God. This is just God. They're humans, but it's not about them in any way. They're completely transparent. Al yedei kiyum haTorah v'mitzvot al derech she'amru ha'avot hen hamerkava v'hinu lefi shekol yamehem hayta zot avodatam. And through the observance, go ahead, Joyce.
Through the observance of the Torah and the mitzvah.
Going on, our sages
applied such a description to the patriarchs, saying that, quote, they themselves constituted the divine chariot, for this was the patriarchs' level of service throughout their lives.
So it's hard to imagine what this is like. Hard to imagine someone that is so nullified that it's not even about their intellect anymore. Their intellect is included in the service. It's not about their emotions. They have powerful emotions included in the service, but they serve at the level of total bitul. Total bitul. They live at the level of awareness that there's only God, and that's their real, actual awareness that they operate on. There's a story I'll share. I heard from Tuli Silverberg, who's a beautiful teacher of this text that I learned from to prepare as well, about the Ruzhner Rebbe, who would be considered a tzaddik of this stature, a great Rebbe. Not even there were many Rebbes, but this is really one of the huge lights. And I'll tell this story to give you a sense of what this is like. This isn't something that's going to be familiar, I think, to us in the Reform community. Maybe it'll feel a little like a sort of a folk tale almost of sorts, but really there's a deep lesson about this, about how someone who's operating at the level where they become a chariot, it's not about their intellect. They can maybe even think they're doing one thing, but in the end, their actions will still be at this level. So the Ruzhner Rebbe had many Hasidim, and there were two couples who actually were, so to speak, mixed marriages, right? Where in one couple, the husband was a chassid of the Ruzhner Rebbe, but his wife was not. His wife was a normal Jew, I believe just traditional Judaism. And the other couple, it was the wife that was a chassid of the Ruzhner Rebbe, and the husband was not. He didn't want to hear about it. I don't need a Rebbe. Never mind this world of Bria, and what's with all these sfirot. I pray to God. I'm done, right? So, they were happy couples, but at one point, the first couple, where the husband was a chassid, became ill. And for a long time, it looked like it was getting worse and worse. And he wanted his wife to go to his Rebbe to get a blessing, to ask for a blessing from God for healing. But she thought, well, it's a waste of time. Why should I go? Go to the doctor, we'll pray for healing ourselves. What do you need a blessing from some person? And the second couple had an opposite problem, where they ran an inn, and they were running into debt and more debt, and it just got worse and worse. And the Poritz, the landowner that owned the land, was ready to throw them in jail, and they were getting more and more severe warnings. And so the chassid who was ill, he wanted his wife to go to the Rebbe, but she didn't want to go. And the wife of the man, the wife who was Hasidic of the man who owned and ran the inn, she wanted him to go to get advice or a blessing from God, from the Rebbe, from the Ruzhner Rebbe. And he said, why are we going to waste time? I got to stay here and fix the business. It's not going to help us to, we pray straight to God. It's not going to help us to go to some guy in another town. And it got worse and worse. Eventually, the couple that had the illness decided, the wife decided, well, what does it hurt? At this point, I'll go. So she got ready and made the journey. She stopped in the town of the second couple, where they knew this other couple, and she said where she was going. And the wife said, well, if my friend's going, why don't I just go with her? I'll get a blessing since she's going anyways. And the husband, who's at his wit's end about how to pay for the inn, was like, fine, go. What's it going to help? It's not going to hurt. At least I won't hear about it again. So off they went. These two women went, and they became even closer friends on the journey. They finally arrived at the Ruzhner Rebbe's his office, his shul, where we would see people. And the way it works when you go into a Rebbe in this tradition is you write a request on a piece of paper for the blessing you'd like the Rebbe to ask to pray to God for. And so they wrote their puns, but as they were talking and chatting, somehow the papers got mixed up, and they each went in with each other's paper. So they each went in with the wrong request. So the first woman came in, whose husband was ill, said, please, Rebbe, we'd like to request a blessing. The Rebbe read the pan, and he gave a general blessing. Everything will be fine. Tell your husband, he should have wonderful, everything will work out with the blessing from God, rest assured. So she went out happy, just with her just a general generic blessing she got. The second woman came in, and this is the woman who's a chassid, and her husband doesn't want to hear about it, and she gives the pan to the Rebbe. The Rebbe looks at it, and she's in her mind thinking, I need a blessing to help us with this financial issue that we're going to get thrown in jail. I'm going to lose all my house. And the Rebbe looks at the pan, and he says to her, your husband should put on bankis, which means leeches. Because that was a practice in the time, that you put on leeches, they drain the blood for whatever reason. My wife tells me it's on occasion still used for some medical purposes, but not so much. So she says, thank you. She goes out a little confused. She says, how are leeches going to help? And she asked the attendant, it was a bit of a strange advice the Rebbe gave us. She says, don't worry, the Rebbe doesn't make mistakes. He's a tzaddik. So they go home. The couple who is ill, everything works out. Eventually, he quickly heals and he's back to health, and they're happy. It's all good. But the couple with the inn, now the wife comes to her husband and she says, so new, what did your Rebbe say to us? What was the blessing? And she says, and she's embarrassed. She says, the Rebbe said that to solve our financial issues, you should put on bankis, leeches. Oh, you crazy. This whole thing is nonsense. It was a waste of time, like I said. And that was it. He didn't want to hear, how are leeches going to help? But as the weeks go by, things get worse and worse. Eventually, it's the day before the Poros's guards are going to show up and just seize everything and throw him into jail. And he says, nothing else to do. Let's try the leeches. Let's try the bankis, because there's nothing else will help at this point. So they put him in a bed. They get these big fat leeches. They put him on him. They're sucking the blood out, and the sheets get all covered in blood. I mean, it's pretty gory. And he's lying there, very, very weak from the leeches sucking out so much blood, and covered. The bed is soaked in blood. And on the door is the guards. Say, open up. You need to pay the ports, or we're going to throw you into jail. And the wife says, I'm sorry, we can't help you. And they look and they see this innkeeper lying in a bed with no energy, and there's blood all over the sheets. What's going on? And the wife says, well, he's not well, but just tell the ports, we'll find the money soon. And they say, no, the port says if he doesn't have the money, we have to bring him to the port's house. He says, how can he come? Look at him. He's not well. So they go back and they tell the ports, we went in and there's no way we can bring him here. I mean, he can't even walk. There's something wrong with the guy. He's covered in blood. The port says, you go back and you bring him here, even if you have to carry him here in his bed. So the guards come and they knock on the door again. They say, sorry, the port has ordered us to carry you to his house to report to him. So the four of them pick up the bed and they're walking through the village and walking through the fields with this poor Jewish innkeeper who's soaked in blood, lying in his bed, half spent. And who should they walk by but the carriage of the port's wife? The carriage of the port's wife. And she looks at this spectacle of these four employees of her husband schlepping this villager covered in blood through a field in a bed. It's like, what's going on here? Guys, what's the story? Say, my lady, your husband has ordered us to carry this villager who is behind on his rent to him to report. She says, what? She says, she addresses the Jew and she says, what's going on here? Why? What's the story? And the Jew, who's, he's already his wit's end, he just thinks quickly, says, "I'm sorry, milady, but, and here he makes up a story to save his life, which is halakhically allowed, I believe. Because I went on a journey to, do a trade that was going to give me the money to pay back your husband. And on the way back, I was attacked by bandits. They beat me mercilessly. They took all my money. And now I can't pay, and I can barely even walk." So the poor his wife was so shocked by this. She wrote immediately back to her house. She said, "Do you know what happened to that villager? He worked so hard to try and pay us, and he was beat up by bandits, and all the money was taken from him. He's half dead out of his devotion to you. You have to forgive everything right away." And of course, just like me, when my wife says something, the Ports knew well enough, let's let that go. So, that afternoon, they got a letter from the Ports saying, "All is forgiven. You have the inn rent-free for the next 3 years. Thanks for your devotion. Very appreciatively yours." So, it reads like a kind of a funny folk story, right? But it's there to show us something very unusual about these tzaddikim, which is, since they're operating at this level beyond what we can comprehend, beyond what comprehension can comprehend, total nullification to God, even if the Ruzhner Rebbe got it wrong intellectually, even if he didn't understand and really thought, "Oh, God is blessed and is confused," a tzaddik like that has refined themselves to the point where it doesn't matter, because what comes out is still going to be exactly what the universe needs. It's exactly what the universe needs. And we can't understand how, because that's understanding asking. That's my consciousness asking. But even if the Ruzhner Rebbe was looking at the wrong note and thought the wrong blessing, somehow it works out that these leeches are going to be the thing that solves the financial problem. And that's how it works when you're dealing with a tzaddik on that level, a very rare individual. So perhaps you're saying, "Well, Cantor Smolash, hold on, I don't buy that. It's some story. How do I know what even happened?" That's fine. You don't need to believe that story to benefit from the Tanya. But if you want to get a glimpse of what happens, as we're about to learn, when we each get a taste of Atzilus, it's good to try and understand this. There's something that goes beyond understanding here. I'd say any questions, but I'm afraid to, so let's just go on. "Ach, mi sheshoresh nishmato katan mehachil avoda tamazo."
But he whose soul's root is of too limited a capacity for this perfect service on the level of a chariot.
Which is almost everybody. So if you're not a great tzaddik of that generation and of history, and you're doing normal, even just an incomplete tzaddik perhaps, right? What do you do? Libater v'likalel be'oro yitbarech be'avodato b'kviyut. I think now Noreen, so that, and you want to unmute. Oh, still muted. There you go.
So that through his service of Torah and mitzvot, he be constantly nullified before and absorbed in God's light.
Right. If we want to have a taste of that service where it's not about my intellect or my intellectual emotions or my emotional emotions, it's just about being absorbed into God like a chariot. How can I do that? Rak lifrakim v'itim shehem et ratzon lamala.
And he can therefore attain this state only intermittently and only at times of divine favor on high.
So just like we learned, time is not an even line just stretching back and forth to this unexplained, endless line of time, so to speak. Time is a structure with 6 circles surrounding a 7th circle in the middle, and that has to do with the week, Shabbat being in the middle. It has to do with cycles of years of 7 years. It has to do with cycles of millennia, 7 millennia. We're in the 6th millennium of Jewish history, approaching the 7th Shabbat. And it's a structure like a petal that opens outwards. It's not just, every time is not the same. Just like that central petal of Shabbat elevates all the days that touch it around it. So there's a time in the day which is elevated and is different from the other times of the day. And that is the windows of time when we're supposed to have a prayer practice And in particular, when we do the Amida, the Shemona Esrei, which is for us, if you know, we say, Ad Hashem, Sifata Tiftach, Baruch Atah Ad Hashem, and we bow and all the business, right? So when you do that, that is a time when you can have, and I can have, a mini Atzilus moment. A mini Atzilus moment. I don't want to say that suddenly your soul is going to be looking into Atzilus and you're going to see total godliness, but that's a moment when somewhere in my subconscious I have a chance to touch that level and to get a taste of the avoda of even a great tzaddik like the Ruzhner Rebbe.
Such as during the Shemona Esrei prayer, which is at the level of Atzilut.
And we could even take, I think I've taught this in person, but not online, but it'd be great to take 4 classes and look at the structure of the whole prayer service. Because just like all the other 4 levels that come out from the 4 letters of God's name that flow out from the Sfirot, as we learned, the prayer service also represents and flows out of those same 4 levels. And so as you do every morning prayer service, you go through first the morning blessings, which are about your physical needs and your physical body and engaging with the physical world. That's the world of Asiya, the lowest world. Then you go to Psukei Zimra, you go to these Psalms, praising God. God, you're amazing. I love you. We're in awe of you. That's engaging the level of my soul that is there in the world of Yetzirah, the world of emotion. Then I go to the Shema, where I intellectually focus on pure oneness, and I focus on things that will create emotional intelligence in me to love and fear God out of my appreciation that the whole world is nullified before the oneness of God, and that is me engaged in the world of Bria. And then I get to the Amida, and the Amida is above even Bria. The Amida, where we bow and we lower ourselves, that's putting us into the state where we're nullifying ourselves, we're surrendering ourselves, we're trying to touch that state of bitul, where I've engaged my physical being, I've engaged my emotional being, I have engaged my intellectual being, and now above that, there's just pure surrender. Just pure surrender. So if you're doing a temple service, perhaps help me and help all of us by taking that moment to have a tiny taste of Atzilus and focus on pure nullification. That's why you stand with your feet together and you don't move and you bow. And if you have your own practice also, sometimes you might be tempted, if you're in a rush, to just kind of like knock one out, so to speak. But Atzilus, the Amida, that's a time to really stop and recognize I can touch something so far above my own capacity that it can link everything else I do to that level of pure surrendered light. Hi, Judy. Hi, Tom. Good to have you. Any questions, let us know on Facebook. Any questions here? That's a lot. Thoughts or questions from us? This is the kind of class that kind of just puts you into this space, doesn't it? We can barely remember to unmute ourselves and when we're going, but it's a powerful practice. You should really, when you get to the Amida, know that just like Shabbat has the capacity to elevate all the mitzvah during the week, the Amida, that has the capacity to connect my soul to even the level of a tzaddik of that stature. Vifrat b'hishtachavot sheba shekol hishtachava hi b'fchinat atzilut kmo shekatuv b'pri Etz Chaim b'Kabbalat Shabbat. Dan, why don't you pick up? I forget where we were. Dan, why don't you go ahead?
And especially when bowing in the 4 designated places in this prayer, for every such act of bowing represents the level of Atzilut, as is written in Pri Etz Chaim in the section dealing with the welcoming of Shabbat.
So we may be very accustomed to this prayer, and we go through it, and that's the choreography, so to speak, of that moment. But we should know the Kabbalah behind it, which is incredibly lofty, incredibly lofty. It's such a potential of change. Kihi inyan bitul beoro yitbarech liot chashiv kameh kela mamash. Joyce, for an embodies.
and only at a time, is that it? And yeah, and only occasionally at a time of divine favor will his soul rise to Atsia it's a lot as, quote, feminine waters, as is known to the students of Kabbalah.
Okay, so for some reason, I don't know if it's my audio cutting out. Let me make sure everyone online heard. And we're actually just a bit above it, for it embodies the idea of self-nullification in God's light, to be counted as absolutely not before him. To be nullified in God's light. So really, there's a point in my soul where that's what it is. There's only God, and there's no me. Azai gam kenika kviut nishmato hu beolam habriya. Sue Ellen?
In the case of he can attend the level of the chariot only at such propitious time, then even at these times, the principal abode of his soul is in the world of Bria, for we are dealing here with a soul associated with the world of Bria.
So if you have just an incomplete tzaddik that's naturally at the world of Bria, and they meditate and create powerful emotions and elevate Torah mitzvahs to Bria, that's a tremendous person. That's a great soul, but it's not one of these tzaddikim, right? So those, even that kind of Jew, they have to rely on the Amida, just like you and me, to be able to touch this level of Atzilus, which only tzaddikim at the level of a chariot function on and work in. Rak lifrakim be'ed ratzon ta'aleh nishmato latzilut bivchinat mayin ukvin kayidua liodechem.
And only occasionally, where am I?
No.
Yeah, that's right.
And only occasionally at a time of divine favor will his soul rise to Atzilut as feminine waters, as is known to the students of the Kabbalah.
There's another term here we've touched on: feminine waters and masculine waters. It's mayin nukvin and mayin d'churim, and it's a procreative image. So it's about human intimacy. You're drawing the metaphor from that, from the male and female fluids that occur during that. So we don't say no more about that. But the feminine waters, that's our hit orus, that's our awakening, that's our reaching out, our studying Torah, our learning, our meditating. That's us creating energy and light. And the male waters, that's when the Ein Sof just sends light down on its own. So usually what happens is the feminine waters rise first. We have to do something, learning as we're doing, or doing a mitzvah, or meditating. And then, because the feminine waters have risen, now the male waters come down to reach them, and you create a corresponding flow from the Ein Sof that comes into the universe and illuminates really every soul, as we learned. But we don't have to go too deep into those concepts. Now, before we meditate today, I just want to give a little introduction to the next section of this chapter. Because till now we've been discussing the concept of avoda, of this spiritual work of meditation and working on myself, whether it's Yitzira, Bria, Yitzilus. We've been discussing it in terms of the reward, which means the light that it creates. And certainly you could make a whole practice of focusing on the light that my soul will enjoy after 120 years when I'm no longer in a body. And I've learned all this Torah, I've done all these mitzvahs, I've elevated them to the world of Bria, and I've covered all my bases. And now my soul has an incredible Gan Eden that it's going to experience afterwards. What a pleasure my soul's going to have. And yeah, that's an approach. So you can go there. But of course, anyone who's been learning the Tanya will start to raise their eyebrows and say, well, isn't that still a little self-centered? If it's about my soul's reward, isn't that just another form of the animal soul, perhaps? I mean, is that really the point of it all? So of course, it's not the point of it all. It's a piece of the picture. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about, not from the point of the reward we receive for the mitzvah, but from the point of what is the true value of any physical mitzvah we do with Kavanah, or any Torah studying we do. And the whole point we'll see of this conversation about the reward is just so that we can understand the nature of the task that we're doing, of the avodah. And what he'll say is, schar mitzvah mitzvah, which we started at the beginning of these chapters, The reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself, which means, as I'll explain, when something is really causing something else, you can learn about the cause from the effect. You can learn about the cause from the effect. So, for instance, if I'm doing something and I'm getting a reward from it, and that reward is truly caused by the action, by examining the reward, the effect, I can learn about the original action that caused it. And it's confusing because so often in the world we think of cause and effect not in its true sense, but just things that follow each other. For instance, a reward might be, as often people point out, a paycheck. So I work for a week, and then I get a paycheck for that week, and maybe I get $1,000 in my paycheck, and I'd say, well, you worked, and that was the cause, and the paycheck is the effect. But it's not really cause and effect. It's not. My work didn't cause the paycheck. It's just my employer gave me the paycheck because they were happy with my work. But if I worked, doing plumbing, or if I worked at a desk job doing accounting, or if I worked as a writer, it's not that my work is causing the paycheck. My work is causing the results of the work, and then I'm getting a paycheck from something else, and they're separated. And you can prove it because it's possible for at the end of the week for your employer to say, sorry, we don't have money, we're not going to pay you this week, right? The work still had a cause, but you didn't get that money. With a mitzvah, it's not like that. It's not that we work and God's happy, so God rewards us with his light. It's like if I work to build a piece of equipment, if I built a phone and I spent a year putting it together myself and getting all the chips, now from using the phone, I can see the nature of what my work was. I actually physically created this. I caused this phone to occur. And by studying the effect, I can see the cause. You must have worked with digital circuitry. You must have worked with coding. You must have worked with screens. I can see the cause from its effect. That's what a mitzvah is like. A mitzvah is not something that we do and then God creates this light. A mitzvah itself is what causes the light. The mitzvah is what's building the light that becomes my Gan Eden. So, of course, we've been learning about the reward, been learning about all this light that we can create and at what level. And I know it's 11:30, so we started late. If anyone needs to head off, please do. No need for any explanations, but I'll go just a few more minutes, then we'll meditate. But in fact, if we look and say, no, all this light we've been talking about, all this beautiful reward of whether it's light in Yetira or light in Bria, or even light in Atzilus, all this reward we've been talking about, that's not a random reward from the mitzvahs we've been doing. That is actually completely being created by the mitzvahs that I did. So what's greater, the Gan Eden that we've been learning about, or the mitzvah that's actually creating the Gan Eden directly? What's the higher thing? What's the most amazing thing? And that's why we learn, of course, that all the pleasure the soul experiences in Gan Eden, all that light, 1 hour of Torah mitzvahs and tshuva perhaps is greater than all that reward from heaven. Just 1 hour here. And so the Alter Rebbe will explain, if we can understand the incredible significance that when I'm holding that piece of matzah in Pesach and saying the blessing and eating it, never mind the light and the reward that's going to happen, I'm actually causing it right now. What I'm holding in my hand, what I'm doing, that mitzvah, that is building directly all of Gan Eden, and it's greater than all of Gan Eden. And so we're learning about the reward, not so we should seek the reward. We're learning about the reward so we can understand the significance of what it is that we do, of creating a home for God by these physical mitzvahs. Any questions about that? We'll pick up page 567 with Hinei Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah. But let's have a moment of meditation. But any questions about that before we finish? So when you're learning about Atzilus, oh, there you go, Sharon.
Yes, this is going back a little ways, but in this lesson, but it's so the human beings who have reached the level of being chariots of God, and they are living on this different level. Are they also living on our level so that they look normal to people and they do normal things and they have a normal life? Or are they kind of floating around with other people, taking care of them totally, and where they're revered beings who don't do anything for themselves.
Yes, a very good point that's embedded in your question. But of course, each level includes all the levels below it. So someone working on the level of Bria also has tremendous emotions, is also a physical person living a physical life, might have a 9-to-5 job, sitting down and eating a meal.
Have a family, having
a family, having children
going on, but on this other level, they are living in this sublime way.
Exactly. So in Judaism, the higher level a person is functioning at does not mean that they're now outside the world, because it all starts with a physical mitzvah. So even these great tzaddikim, when it comes to Pesach, as we keep saying, they're sitting at a table, they're eating matzah, they're having a meal. And I know in spiritual worlds, there's sort of some currency to seeming unusual or otherworldly or somewhat antisocial, and it's beneath me to do this, and but in Judaism, it's not that at all. A very, you could be sitting next to the most highly developed spiritual practitioner, and hopefully they're just having a normal conversation. It's just perhaps they're extra friendly, they're smiling, they're happy to see you. Maybe what you sense is the great love they have for you, because they just love other Jews naturally, because God loves Jews, so do they. They love creation, they love every person, right? And I will say that those that have had a chance to have an in-person meeting with a great tzaddik, and my teacher Laibl Wolf had several hour-long sessions with the last Rebbe of Chabad, who was the seventh disciple generationally of the Alter Rebbe. Definitely, many people say there's something about looking to the face and hearing the voice where they did get a sense that they're looking at something different, that there's a holiness. It's all they can describe. It's like not like a normal person where they know there's an ego and there's an opinion and they're dealing with a personality. Really, they said you hear the voice, you look into the eyes, and you realize there's only God. The person somehow helps you encounter that point in yourself that also experiences just pure oneness with God. So yes, definitely a great tzaddik is going to be eating, having children, living in the world, socially very normal, right? But at the same time, when they're focusing on connecting with one of their chassidim or giving advice, there is something else that people report about their presence. Did I answer your question?
Their wife does everything.
That's what I was thinking. It's the traditional, and they will probably be having the occupation of the traditional scholar, who they will probably be having the occupation of a traditional scholar whose wife does do everything, and he goes to the shul and he studies and he's with people, men like-minded, and they are doing this all the time. But yet when you encounter him socially in a social situation, he will be like regular.
Yeah, maybe. I think it depends on the person. I'll report from friends that I have in communities that follow the Hasidic community that the gentlemen in the community that I know learn probably 10 times the Torah that I learn in terms of time and depth, and also probably do at least 3 to 5 times the household work for their kids and for their families, sleep a lot less, and are waste a lot less time than me. So I don't know. I wouldn't make blanket statements about it. Probably there's some people that live.
Maybe historically they did.
Yeah, perhaps. So probably there's some people that they really are into learning and they learn 12 hours a day, and their wife brings them food and they haven't touched a broom in 30 years. But I don't know anyone like that myself. And certainly the last Rebbe of Chabad I'll speak to was a tremendous scholar. The stories of his genius are unbelievable. And he was living quite a quiet life, helping with the organization and really spending his time learning. And when they asked him to be the Rebbe, he refused for a full year, really very, very energetically, because he just wanted to learn. But when he finally took over, he really spent most of his time helping people, meeting with people, discussing things with people, having, working for the community, and sacrificed what we understand he wanted to do, which is just learn Torah. So there's all kinds of different work, and I think in the end, each one of us has to just try and do the work that's in front of us. But yeah, very good point.
Thank you.
Let's just finish with a little quick meditation. I know we've gone over, so thanks for your patience. So just let your breath open up as we've learned. It should be nice and deep, slow. And let's fully explore the 4 sections of the breath, breathing in for 4, 3, 2, 1. Let the breath stay in. 3, 2, 1. Breathing back out. 3, 2, 1. Stay empty. 3, 2, 1. Continue that cycle. Enjoying each of the 4 stages. Keep breathing nice and slow. There's tremendous physical and psychological benefits to this style of breathing already happening within each of us. Let's also open up a wisdom gateway. That gateway will be the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. It's a gateway to that which is beyond my comprehension. Perhaps it looks beyond it like emptiness. And finally, in that gateway, let's put this concept. The Amida Atzilus is self-nullification. It's bitul. There we can touch the world of Atzilus. Just picture that concept. That quality of the Amida, that quality of myself vanishing. Let that fill your mind and fill the wisdom gateway. Any part of your mind that's pulled away, just let that image flow in and fill it with light, sound, details. Perhaps if you're watching, so to speak, on a small black and white TV, enlarge the image you're seeing to that of a big Omnimax screen with full sound and color. Oh, good to stay here and continue meditating for 5, 10, 15 minutes if you like. But notice any emotions that are being generated as you focus on this concept. The Amida that we all pray, the Amida is bitul, self-nullification, touches Atzilus. Let's wiggle our fingers, wiggle our toes. Beautiful work, even if it's just for a few minutes. That's powerful stuff that will come back to help us in our work. So Yasher Koach, everybody. We're going to pick up again where we left off. I'm going to sign off on Facebook. As always, if you'd like to join our class here in real time, email Maya at temple-israel.org. But happy if you catch us on Facebook or on YouTube later, and wishing you an amazing week.